For centuries, people have believed that we are born as blank slates, that our minds are completely shaped by our environment and experiences. But this idea could be completely wrong because, as Mr. Pinker argues, this concept is not just a scientific claim, but it is also a moral belief that says all human traits come from social influences rather than anything innate. But nowadays, thanks to genetics and neuroscience, we know this is not true because our biology plays a key role in how we learn, how we think, and even in our personalities. So, should we still base modern education on an outdated idea? My name is Camila Bermudez, and in this video, I will argue that education should not be based on the blank slate theory because it ignores innate differences, overlooks how the brain actually learns, and sets unrealistic expectations for students. The blank slate theory assumes that all children have the same cognitive potential, meaning that if they receive the same education, they should all reach the same level. But is that we actually see? According to Mr. Pinker, the human mind is not just a blank page waiting to be filled. It already has built-in tendencies that shape how we think, feel, and learn. Um, Also, we have some scientific evidence, for example, twin studies that have shown that intelligence and personality are mostly inherited. Even when identical twins grow up in different environments, they tend to have similar IQs and talents. Also, Harvard research has confirmed that abilities like memory, reasoning, and problem solving are strongly influenced by genetics. Mm, so, for example, think about Mozart. If the mind were a blank slate, then any child with enough training could have composed symphonies at 6 age. But we know that Mozart had a natural talent for music. So, if we ignore this difference and treat all students as if they learn in the same way, we were making a big mistake that limits their potential. In another hand, beyond individual talents, we now know that learning is not just a matter of effort. It follows biological rules because the brain is pre-wired to learn some things more easy than others, depending on our age. Um, so Mr. Pinker argues that some learning happen naturally at specific stages in a child's development. And if they miss, they become much harder or even impossible to learn later in the life. Besides, we have some scientific evidence, such as Noam Chomsky's research, that shows that children are naturally wired to learn languages with very little effort. And also, the critical period hypothesis proves that young children can learn languages effortlessly, but after in the puberty, their ability declines in a significant way. So, for example, if the mind were really a blank slate, then an adult could learn a new language as easily as toddler. But we know that it is not the case. So, in education, this means that we need to respect those natural learning stages because we cannot expect a 6-year old child to achieve advanced algebra, and we cannot expect a teenager to learn a language as effortlessly as a toddler. So we have to consider it. In addition, one of the biggest problems with education based on a blank slate theory is that it ignores the biological limits of learning. Because it assumes that with enough effort, all students can perform at the same level in every subject. But Mr. Pinker rejects that people actually have different cognitive strengths because their brains are wired differently, and not only because of differences in their upbringing. Um, so, for example, learning disorders dyslexia, ADHD, that is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and dyscalculia have biological causes and they can be overcome just by trying harder. Um, Also, brain scans um, show that dyslexic people process written language in a different way than those who without dyslexia. So let's think in a concrete example. Mm, if the mind were a blank slate, we could just reprogram a person with dyslexia to read as easily as others. But science has proven that dyslexic brains are structurally different, so it is impossible. Mm, so this is why instead of forcing all students to follow the same teaching methods, we should adapt education to their individual needs, especially in those cases that where the students really need another type of methods, another rhythm to learn. At this point, you might be wondering, does acknowledge innate differences mean we give up on students who struggle? But absolutely not, because instead it helps us to create better and more um, fair educational approaches. And some might argue that accepting innate differences um, promotes inequality, but actually it is the opposite, because understand differences does not mean giving up on students, but it means helping each of them to succeed in their own way and to reach their full potential. Because, as Mr. Pinker argues, a fair society should not treat everyone as if they were identical, as if they were the same, but rather acknowledge differences and create opportunities based on them. So, for example, a musically gifted child might never reach their full potential if they don't have the access to an instrument. But if they have no um, musical talent to begin with, any amount of training will turn them into a Mozart or a talent musician. To wrap up, it is clear that education might align with a scientific understanding regarding that we are not blank slates, and our teaching methods should reflect that reality. So, education must be based on science and not on ideologies. Also, recognizing cognitive differences allows for a more effective and fair educational system, because um, as I mentioned before, according to Mr. Pinker, the mind is not an blank slate waiting to be filled. Rather, it is structured by evolution to learn in specific ways. Finally, I consider that the goal of education is not about making everyone identical. It's not about making everyone to behave and to think on the same way, but it is about unlock each individual talent. So we have to think on how we could approach learning to ensure that every student has the opportunity to succeed based on their own strengths, talents, and abilities. So that's it, and thank you so much.